Good evening. I'm Kevin Freeman, and welcome to a special edition for the special election candidates night in Scarborough, live in person at Scarborough Town Hall. We're returning from the Zoom meetings that we've been doing since the fall of 2019. We're here tonight to meet the candidates who are running for the to finish the term for Paul Johnson, who resigned his seat. Paul, you may remember, was elected last fall. So this seat on the Scarborough Town Council will be to finish his term, which will run through 2024. So a little over 2 years remaining. It's a special municipal election for town council that will be held in conjunction with the June 14th elections. The primary for the state will be taking place that same day for the gubernatorial, the congressional candidates, the state representatives, and the state senate. It is also the date that we vote to validate the town's school budget. And so that'll all take place on June 14th at the high school in person. But on May 16th, early voting will begin here in Scarborough. The ballots have not been printed yet. We haven't received them yet, but we wanted to get on the air because, as you know, this will run on continuous loop on Scarborough Community Television Channel 3 and also be available to viewers on the Scarborough Public Meetings YouTube channel. We're broadcasting live tonight on Wednesday, April 27th. Let's meet the candidates. Oh, and I wanted to say, the Scarborough Community Chamber of Commerce is the sponsor of this event. President Tanya Beckwith has helped me with organizing it all. And along with my longtime volunteers and friends, Art Dillon from the Scarborough Community Chamber, Nancy Kroll from the Scarborough Public Library and the Scarborough Community Chamber of Commerce, and Karen Martin, the director of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation. Our candidates tonight are Peter Freilinger from 8 Jasper Street, Nicholas Mcgee from Riverwoods Drive, and Marty Topple from Ladd Drive. And I will give a short introduction of their background that they have supplied me. And there are my glasses. Peter Freilinger is and I am pronouncing that correct, Donna. Peter Freilinger is a consultant and entrepreneur who lives in the Blue Point neighborhood. He grew up in Cape Elizabeth, and his parents moved to Scarborough shortly after he graduated from Harvard University in 1995. He was awarded a bachelor's degree with honors in American history. He then moved away, as many young Mainers of his generation did, spent 25 years in finance and banking, holding senior executive roles in San Francisco, Seattle, Alberta, and London before returning to Maine and Scarborough in 2018. He returned to be close to his family, all of whom live in Scarborough. He has a young son who is now a 4th grader at Wentworth. He serves on the board of the Cedars, Maine's largest nonprofit senior care facility. He is also on the advisory board of the Portland Museum of Art. He is currently serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals and is on the Long Range Planning Committee, which he helped craft the town's recently approved 2021 Scarborough Comprehensive Plan. In the middle is Nick Mcgee. Nick is a native Mainer, moved to Scarborough in 2010. His wife, Vanessa, and 3 wonderful children, ages 11 to 14, all attend Scarborough Public Schools. Nick is a graduate of Providence College with a BA in political science and history. He is a small business owner of Summit Property Management, which is primarily focused on residential condominium management. His community service includes 8 years on the Scarborough Planning Board, 2 as chairman. Most recently, Nick was the chair of the Ad Hoc Charter Review Committee and has also volunteered his time as a Little League coach for 3 years. Last but not least is Marty Topple. Marty is a lawyer. He graduated from the University of Michigan Law School in May of 2016. Prior to that, received his AB from Princeton University, graduating cum laude in June of 2010. Marty is a lawyer with Verrill Dana. He has worked with other firms in the Portland area, including Pretty Flaherty. He was with a lawyer in Boston with Goodwin Proctor, and also worked with the U.S. Court of Appeals as a law clerk for the firm in Concord, New Hampshire. And interestingly enough, Marty also has service with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, in Washington, D.C., where he served as an intelligence analyst in the Criminal Investigative Division. He developed and analyzed strategic intelligence for publications to the U.S. intelligence community. Welcome, Marty Topple. Welcome, all three of you. And with that, Peter Freilinger, your opening statement.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Thanks to my fellow folks who are running for the town council position. Looking forward to getting to know you guys more and also answering the questions of the community. I was born and raised in Maine, Scarborough, and this part of the world is kind of in my blood. I moved back here 4 years ago to be closer to my family. I've got some older parents. My sister lives in the Winnick's Neck area. I moved into Blue Point, and when I got back, one of the things I wanted to do was get involved with the community quickly, and that's why I joined the Long Range Planning Committee, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm actually a member of the Personnel Appeals Board, which hopefully we'll never meet. The part of why I'm running is because my son is in 4th grade at Wentworth. I think it's important to show our kids what it means to be involved in our communities. And it's important to do things as simple as raising your hand and offering to serve the community in whatever capacity you can. In serving on the Long Range Planning Committee, one of the things that was marvelous to me was getting to know the community of Scarborough and its diversity, its richness, its kind of uniqueness in Maine. We are, I think, probably very unique in Maine in the sense that we're a collection of communities. We're not just one community, we're a collection of communities. And as we face the next few years, we're going to face a lot of difficult questions about how we come together as that collection of communities to manage our growth, to manage the challenges of environmental change, things like Route 1 flooding, or close to home for me, Pine Point Road flooding on lunar high tides. All these things are going to impact us as a community. I think I've got some great ideas. I think I've been able to share them already on the Zoning Board of Appeals and on the Long Range Planning Committee. I'd love to be able to offer that service and offer that perspective on town council as well. My son actually is not with us tonight because he's in a conference room eating pots of bread and playing on his iPad. But this is really why I'm running. I'm running to show him what it means to be a part of a community and help that community in times of growth and in times of challenge. So thank you very much. I hope you'll vote for me, but I'm joined by two very, very capable competitors, and we'll hear what they have to say as well.
Thank you, Peter. Nick Mcgee, your opening statement.
Yeah, thank you to the chamber and everyone here, and clearly very accomplished gentleman sitting next to me. So it is a privilege to be here again. When I say again, I did try to run back in November 2020. My memory serves correct. Seems like a long time ago. But I think the reason that I'm doing this again was the reason I did the first time. Was I spent 8 years working on the planning board, and we spent a lot of time going through the projects that are happening within the town and working within our ordinances and figuring out what challenges that the community comes to a board with when dealing with government, but then also having to sit here and enforce the rules of government. So at some point in time, you just kind of light clicks, you say, okay, I've been enforcing all of our rules. How about we try to influence them now? And I think that's where I'm coming from, which is take that knowledge and that experience and then use it to benefit how we operate, not just with people who have to interact with our government, but also bring that vision for what this looks like for us, for our kids 30 years down the road. And when I say that, I think what's important, what we keep missing in some of these conversations, because it's very easy to get lost down these little wormholes, is that bigger 30,000 foot view kind of frame of mind. We have needs and they keep popping up. So I'll pick on Nancy. She's in the, we have a library expansion request. We're going to have a primary school request. We have explosive growth going along Route 1. How, there's a request and a demand for a community center. How do these all interplay? How do we make them work together so we can, A, try to avoid overlap, B, make sure that when we set a policy within the town, that the people of this community, developers as well, they know the rules of the game, and we don't keep trying to change it every year or two on them. Let's have a broader consensus of how we go forward. And I think that would serve us all well. And so that's what I'm kind of looking forward to do.
Thank you, Nick Mcgee. Marty Topple.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to participate in this event, particularly live, one of my first live events in what feels like forever. I hope this evening will be very useful to all of you. And thank you to the Chamber for setting this up. My name is Marty Topple. I'm obviously one of the candidates for Town Council. My wife Meredith and I live over by Beach Ridge with our 1-year-old chocolate lab named Moose. We moved here from Boston about 18 months ago at the height of the pandemic, but Meredith and I both have deep roots in Maine. Mare's folks live in Agunquit, and my mom's family has been farming in Wells since they helped settle the town. So I actually grew up spending summers working on my grandparents' farm in Wells. So Cumberland County feels a little bit far north for me, but we wanted to move to Scarborough in particular because it's a wonderful community with a really fantastic school system and a quality of life and opportunities to engage in activities that are just really hard to beat. So Scarborough is where we wanted to start our family. I'm running for town council first and foremost because I believe that public service is a really important civic responsibility. That's one reason that I joined the FBI out of college. Serving on town council will let me get to know Scarborough better. And at the same time, I hope it will let me give back meaningfully to the community and also to help my neighbors. I agree with many of you, as shown by the recent community survey, that overall we're fortunate to have things pretty good here in Scarborough. That being said, though, there are challenges relating, among other things, to planning and dealing with the growth of the town. The same challenges that many other communities in Southern Maine are facing right now. For those of you that are adamantly opposed to all of that growth, I really apologize. I guess Meredith, Moose, and I are part of that problem. But seriously, these issues and others that we'll talk about tonight are important. And I'm running for town council, not because I think I have all of the answers, but because I think I have the traits that I'd like to see in my town councilors: fairness, open-mindedness, a willingness to study the issues, willingness to listen to my neighbors about their concerns. And if it helps, I'm also smart and hardworking. But enough about me. Thank you for coming here, those of you that are here in person, to share your questions, and those of you that have submitted questions online. I hope that by the end of the hour, we all have a much better idea about the three of us and the things that we each can bring to the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty Topple. Well, everyone's been waiting for the big question, right? The library. I just thought I'd get to this one before we get to the other questions that are out there. Several counselors have indicated that they feel the library has answered key questions posed by the council and others, and has done an appropriate due diligence to allow its bond request to be placed on the fall ballot. Setting aside how you might vote in November, do you agree with the other counselors that it's time to have the voters weigh in on a proposed project? Nick?
Can I expand on my answer? a
Yes,
little
yes, you certainly can.
Yes, I believe the voters should weigh in. I had the privilege of crashing the party with Peter here with Nancy. She gave us a great tour of the library. And for those that haven't been in there, they are doing their best with the least amount of space. They are crammed to the walls, and they could use more space, clearly. And the efficiency of the operation was impressive. I think Nancy's dedication to the community and for 40 years, I believe, really shines. And great people, incredible. I believe the voters should vote on this. If I had one hesitation or concern, it goes back to my previous point of whether or not some of the services that are going to be planned for and provided for in that library may or may not be duplicated in other initiatives coming down the road toward us. And that's how I would frame it. But I think every voter has the right and the ability and the information made available from the library and the council to make those decisions.
Thank you, Nick. Marty Topple, should we be voting on the Scarborough Library expansion?
Well, I don't think that's a fair question because Nancy and I haven't had our tour yet. That's happening on Saturday. No, I am a huge bibliophile. I love libraries in general. I use the town library quite frequently. And I think that I have read some of the materials online. And I think that there is enough information available to let the people weigh in on how they would like to proceed. That being said, I think the questions of how we allocate our resources as a town are difficult and they are recurring, and it's hard to continue to put things off. And I think sometimes there's a willingness to think that we can sort of deal with some of this long range planning later on down the line. And so I think with the library, my opinion is that the time has come to kind of really start addressing that.
Thank you, Marty Topple. Peter Freilinger.
Yeah, I think it's time for us to put this forward to the voters. And I think the proposal that's been put forward by the library and has been reviewed by council to date is a thoughtful one and is a library that can help our community over the next 20 to 30 years, which is really what we're trying to do to help here. If we look at it, the library is itself 30 years old. It's been a magnificent resource for the community over that time. It was well placed when it was placed sort of close to the schools. It's a resource that our kids use all the time. But I think Nick said it well. They're maximizing the use of every ounce of space right now, and they need more. If I think of my parents who like the large print books, they love going to the stacks to look for whatever's new for the latest mysteries and things like that. It's too tight. They need help just navigating the library at this point. And we owe it to, therefore, not only our kids, but our older citizens to give them a resource that they're clearly using and enjoying. I hear Nick's comment on the overlap of resources. There's a lot of other concern about the potential community center and things like that. But I think the library has thoughtfully considered the fact that that this is not an either or question of a community center or a library. The amenities are different and they can be slightly overlapping, but therefore add to the community even more so by having a slight overlap. So I think it's time to bring it to the town. I think with COVID somewhat in the rearview mirror, it's time to think about what a normal library looks like for the next 30 years. And it's the right time. And I'll be honest with you, I'm supportive of the library.
Thank you, Peter. Marty, you're going to be starting off our next round. And I brought props tonight for the first time in 22 years. You got to stay with the times. A lot, and it fell with one of the questions that we had submitted. A lot of questions have been raised about the community survey. And in the questions that we were receiving, a lot of the input of this community survey is factoring into a lot of talk in the community. At the same time, I just show the 7 points of the comprehensive plan from 2021 that has come up quite a bit. And two of you were a part of that process. The question is, what tools do you use as you go through your decision-making as a town councilor, what will you use to make the decisions that you come to?
I think that's a great question. So as a lawyer by training, I'm probably predisposed to use too many different tools. I think in making a hard decision or even an easy decision, if you ask my wife when we're shopping at the store, I really like to try and get as many different pieces of information about a given question as possible so that I feel at the end of it that I've had enough perspectives from various sides to make a decision. So I think the community survey and more broadly, community feedback and input from people that live here is a crucial piece of information that the council should be considering every time it thinks about a question that has an impact on all of us. I think the strategic plan is another example of a really carefully considered, thought through document that reflects a lot of people's hard work and best judgment. And I think that's another critical source of input. But I think as a counselor, it's important to not rely too much on any one source or any one sort of set of ideas, and to really be open to hearing from a lot of different viewpoints so that you have, at least for me, a sense that I've really thought through the various angles of the question. And then I'm pretty confident that I'm comfortable making my decision and I have a reason for why I think that's the right decision.
Thank you, Marty. Peter Freilinger?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's an interesting question. In terms of the issues that face the town, I think the two most important tools are your eyes and your ears. We all live in the town. We drive over the streets of the town every day to go to the grocery store, to take our kid to school, to visit my parents, wherever we go. So we can see kind of the fabric of the town as we go, and recognizing the change that the town is going through. First and foremost is just visual. It's what's happening with your own eyes and what you're observing with your own eyes. Your ears are important too, though, because that's about listening. And I think Marty said it well. There's the survey was important. The work that went into the comprehensive plan involved a tremendous amount of community outreach. It involved a tremendous amount of I think the Plan-a-Palooza sections, as we call them, and that got feedback from all parts of the community. And I think that was important too. It's not just listening to the people who are able to or aware of a survey being sent out. It's also listening to people by pulling them into the conversation and pulling them into the discussion, and making sure that voices that might not normally go online for a survey are also heard. So it's also keeping your ears open when you go shopping and listen to what people are talking about when they're shopping, when they're trying to figure out what to buy for mayonnaise, and what their concerns are at the moment. A lot of concerns for people right now, as we can hear in the grocery store, are inflation, our prices. That's going to feed back into concern about taxes and about how we use their money efficiently. So keeping your ears open and listening to that is vitally important. So the two tools are very simple: your ears and your eyes.
Thank you, Peter Freilinger. Nick Mcgee?
Hi, thanks. It's a really good question. There's so many different avenues where you gather that information, and I think they're both correct here. You gather it at the bus stop. Sometimes it's in the shopping aisle. It just happened to me the other day. Sometimes it's on a ball field. Those surveys are great tools as well. It's a direct appeal to the community. What do you think about X, Y, and Z? Take that information, great. The other part of this, though, and I'm going to go back to my professional career here, is that long-term planning aspect, which is when you take a step back and you try to plan, what's your data? If we're worried about inflation or any other topics like that, or people taxes, I mean, it's a real concern at this stage with the inflation, the way things are. If you're listening, how are you taking that information and then applying it to the data you're seeing here as a counselor? When you go and ask for either a reserve study or a capital improvement plan, how do you translate what you're hearing into a good positive action for the community overall? And that's also one of the most difficult parts of this. And I wonder why the three of us are even thinking about doing this, is you are going to hear competing interests constantly, right? You're the bad guy to somebody all the time. And so my first job out of college was working out of a mayor's office in Rhode Island. And he said to me one day, he goes, you've done the right thing if everyone is pissed at you. And I thought that was kind of funny, but the logic being, no one got everything they ever wanted. You had to compromise a little, and hopefully what you did at the end of the day was the best step for that community. And I kind of feel that way sometimes too. I've got my own very strong personal feelings about growth in this community. But I had a great experience on the ad hoc charter committee, where the council assembled people who had been here new, 1 year, 9 months in some cases, and then others that had lived here for 40 years, some elderly, some, first-time moms. And you got that flavor of everyone that's now here in town, and to listen to each one of them bring their own experiences, it was incredible. So it's just that kind of pinch that reminds you to just be aware of everyone's feelings and see what happens next. So.
Thank you, Nick. Peter, you'll be starting off on this next question, which again came in over email. Do you think Scarborough's town character, roads, traffic, natural resources, sewer system, schools, public services can properly handle the growth that's in the pipeline over the next 1 to 5 years?
That's a big question.
It is.
I think I'd approach it in sort of in two ways. First off, over the next 1 to 5 years, I think that in general, our infrastructure is handling it with two difficult exceptions. One is the schools. Clearly, the elementary and the middle school need some additional capacity. We're going to have to face that, I think, very promptly. And that's not even about the growth that's taking place in the next 1 to 5 years. It's the growth that's already taking place, has already taken place over the past 5 years. And I think we're going to have to address that pretty quickly. And I see that not so much at Wentworth. Wentworth was well designed and continues to be a great asset as part of our academic infrastructure. But clearly, the elementary school expansion issue is going to have to come up, and dealing with the middle school crowding is also big. And that's important to me. My son's going to be in middle school in 2 years, so I'm thinking about that actively. The other 1 to 5 year question, I think, is transit. Although I think we've got some good high level plans around that, especially around what's being considered with MDOT and with the town and with the developers on Payne Road. The Payne Road infrastructure renewal, whatever you might call it, the set of projects from the South Portland border down to Cabela's is I think thoughtfully planned out. It will be a pain for everyone over the next few years as that gets carried out, but I think it's being done thoughtfully. More broadly, the infrastructure issues I think that we're going to face is more in the 5 to 15 year horizon. And I think Nick has mentioned this, but I think he's thinking of it right. If you take the 30,000 foot view, it's not just thinking about what's 1 to 5 years out. It's the integrated planning for what we need to plan for 5 to 15 years down the road. And that, I think all of the infrastructure items you mentioned are going to come under strain, whether it's because of rising sea levels and how that impacts the road network across town, how it impacts our natural resources, the beaches, et cetera, and the boat landings, or just the general level of growth and what that means across the entire schools and public amenities network. So I think the challenge for the town council over the next 1 to 5 years is really planning for 15 years worth of growth, and then making sure we're making the immediate improvements we need for the things that we've already kind of outgrown. So.
Thank you, Peter. I'll repeat the question. Do you think Scarborough's town character, roads, traffic, natural resources, sewer system, schools, and public services can properly handle the growth that's in the pipeline over the next 1 to 5 years? Nick Mcgee?
Yeah, thank you. Over the next 1 to 5 years, I tend to agree with Peter here on most everything he's just said. I think over the next 1 to 5 years, we certainly can muddle through. I think there was one term in there that just stood out, and it was the first one you said, because it wasn't like the others, was character, right? And I think that's now, I'm getting the sweats from 2020. That's kind of where I was going with this earlier. Character is something you don't recapture. More roads, we can deal with larger sewer lines, CMP, it's all at an inconvenience, right? But what you don't recapture is that character, that convenience. So perfect example, I think that Payne Road that you had referenced, if my memory serves, it was the traffic movement permit, which we refer to as the TMP, I think is calling for 3,300 vehicle trips during peak hours to go through that area. I believe that's the correct number. And if I'm not, someone can throw something at me. I'm looking at you, Karen. That's a massive amount. Now, let's translate that into real life. It's an extra 10 minutes on your commute in and out of work, right? That's 86 hours a year of commuting time that you just added. Just for 10 minutes extra in your car. And I think that's what you lose, right? It's the 86 hours you didn't see coming. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts. And I think that's what I've been waving my arms around about. And it's not because I hate developers or development. There's a time and a place for it. I think my point has always been, let's get in front of it. Let's manage it. Let's not make it a headache in 10 to 15 years, which is, I think Peter's right on, where it's really going to hit home.
Thank you, Nick. Marty, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I have
Okay.
a fair shake at it.
Okay,
It's going to be hard as the third man going to really say much that hasn't already been said and very eloquently. And I'm not going to pretend to anybody that I have the level of granular, detailed knowledge that these two gentlemen have, because they've been involved in planning for all of the things that we're going to be seeing in the next 1 to 5 years. But there are a couple of things from the question and what's been said so far that I really would like to weigh in on. And I think one is, it's critically important to make sure that as we're looking at development projects and growth in the town, that we continue to do what we've been doing, which is really think long and hard about what the longer term impacts are going to be, to really think long and hard about, can the roads support putting a warehouse district where the speedway is? Can the road support some of the other development projects that we'd like to do? And if the answer is yes in the short term, great. If the answer is maybe not in the longer term, then we need to make sure that we plan appropriately for that. And as somebody who is relatively new to Scarborough, living here, I hear your character point. I think it resonates with a lot of people that live here and people like myself and my wife that wanted to come live here. There are certain things about Scarborough that really are unique to Scarborough. And I think it's a real challenge to balance, I think, sort of the inevitability of a lot of the growth that we're seeing, not just in Scarborough, but again, in this part of the state in particular, against preserving what makes Scarborough unique, but not being so focused on the way things were that we don't appreciate the fact that the way things can be equally good, if not better, in terms of the character of the community. So I think that's a wonderful question, and I think the town, in my opinion, has done a good job of planning for the next 1 to 5 years and how those impacts are going to work. That being said, I drive Payne Road to and from work every day, and I would hate for that to add, another half hour of my commute. I left Boston for a reason, but some of this growth is inevitable, and I think is frankly a good thing for the community, as long as we think about strategically how we would like to go, so that we can preserve and enhance the character through the growth. I don't think it's an all or nothing proposition.
thank you, Marty Topple. As you were answering the questions, it reminded me of the late 90s when Wex was talking about going right at the end of Mussey Road across, and they were talking about the improvements would have included a traffic light. And of course, Wex went to South Portland at that time, and it never happened, but neither did the traffic light. So let's move on to our next question, and it's Nick Mcgee who will be answering first, then Marty, then Peter. And Nick, question in via email: what is the appropriate pace of growth in Scarborough?
That's a really good question. So back when they were working on the GMO, and it's actually being worked on again, I believe the council on May 7th is taking up the topic to do an amendment or a remove and replace, if I could recall correctly. But part of the issue I had when the original GMO was kind of getting reworked a couple of years ago was there's a lot of loopholes in there, and I think that's my problem with it today. There's, I don't know if people know this, there is zero limit on the number of affordable houses you can put into this community. You do not need a growth permit. They don't count against the growth permits that we currently manage under the GMO. Fine, I hear the community say that they'd like to see some more affordable housing, but how much? And we have no mechanism to stop it. That should concern everyone here. I think the other, so I think I'll go back to the original question. What's the right amount of growth? I almost wish we could look at it in a population sense, right? So if we were thinking we'd like to see maybe 1,000 new residents here a year, what's that equate to in the types of housing that's being pulled? So if your average single family household has, call it 3.2 people in it, but your average apartment has 1.2 people in it, there's got to be a way to come up with a formula to try to get, it's a percentage, because no matter what type of housing you put in, you're still dealing with the public safety aspects, the transportation, those still have impacts. I mean, even at 1,000 extra residents a year in this community, that's another 200 cars down at Higgins Beach looking for a parking spot in the summer. It's mind blowing. And to grow at, say, 1,000 people per year would still put it down less than 5% growth, which I think is probably, your target's got to be 3 to 4% at most, I think is reasonable. That's the best I'm gonna do tonight on my target. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Marty Topple, what is the appropriate pace of growth for Scarborough?
So I am not going to be able to put a percentage on it. This is one of those things where I guess I put my lawyer hat on and I say it's a really complicated question, like all of these, with a lot of competing interests and competing facets. And I think the town council, when thinking about how to use its ordinances like the GMO, for example, this is a perfect type of problem where I think it's incumbent on the council to make sure that it's getting a wide variety of different viewpoints. So I want to hear what the developers have to say about what they think the appropriate level of growth is and why. I want to hear what people that are knowledgeable about the town's infrastructure and long-range planning have to say about what they think is appropriate and why. And I think that those are all data points that I would want to consider. My personal opinion is that the appropriate pace of growth is, to sound amorphous, a measured pace of growth. We don't want growth out of control. I don't think we want no growth. I think Scarborough and Higgins Beach traffic depends on people moving here, but also depends on people visiting here and wanting to be a part of this community in the summer and all of our other seasons. So I think it's hard for me to put a number on it and say I would want X number of new houses in Scarborough a year. But that being said, I'm going to pivot quickly to the growth management ordinance, which I think is a very good tool that the town council has available to it, and being able to sort of tweak how that is applied and how that's formulated will, I think, allow the town council and the residents to have a say in how much of what kind of growth is put in place. So there are a variety of tools that are available. I'm not saying that they're all dialed in perfectly at this point, but I think that we should have some cause for optimism that when we start deciding about these issues, we have the tools in our toolbox to make some meaningful limits to growth.
Peter Freilinger?
I think with a, excuse me, I think with a town like Scarborough, the question of how much growth is the right number is the wrong place to start from. If you look at our town, it's simply too diverse. Growth in Higgins Beach is not the same as growth in the Downs, is not the same as growth in the RF districts over on the other side of the Turnpike, is not the same as growth on Jasper Street, which has seen an explosion of housing development if you've ever been to Jasper Street recently. You know, the GMO is kind of a blunt force instrument. And as we went through the long range planning process and came up with a comprehensive plan, I think the lesson I drew from that is that there has to be a more nuanced and subtle interplay of how we use zoning and how we use the growth management ordinance to manage growth in an appropriate way. Is there a one headline number for growth in Scarborough? Well, we probably can't grow too many. If we have too much family growth, we're going to have stress on the schools. We have to be aware of that. And certain types of development will encourage families. Other types of development will encourage single homeowners. We have to consider the needs of older members of the community who want to, if you will, age in place. They want to stay in Scarborough as they move out of their single family home and into a period of their life where they might be an apartment dweller again, or might need might need elderly housing options. The amount of growth, though, balances what the needs of the community are in terms of its population and people who want to be a part of that population, and the natural environment that we have that we live in. We've had too much growth in the rural districts. I'll be in my view. There's been too many houses placed on 1.5 to 2.5 acre lots in the RF districts that are not rural character. They're more Connecticut suburban character. And we should be using the growth management ordinance in combination with the zoning ordinances to limit that type of growth, which has eroded the character of Scarborough, I think, over the years. That being said, there are parts of Scarborough which could use and could manage more growth. The Downs, I think, is a thoughtfully constructed project that creates a new neighborhood of focused growth that would allow the town to grow without creating continual pressures on the rural character of the town, which is a big part of why we all live in Scarborough. So I think it's not a single number, Kevin. I think it's a very nuanced and mapped approach that uses all the tools that are available to the council, not just a GMO.
Thank you, Peter. Marty, you're next. We've got about 15 minutes left. The Downs proposal is currently in negotiation. As a counselor, what concerns would you have? And what are the positive impacts or negative impacts of the GMO should it pass?
So I think one of the concerns that I have about the Downs project, and one of the things that I would want more information on as a counselor than I have right now, is really a better understanding of exactly how to get the Downs and the growth that we allow in the near term versus the long term dialed in the right way, such that the development there succeeds and creates the right sort of neighborhood feel that we were talking about, and isn't, on the one hand, so immediately explosive that we don't have the infrastructure in place to support it, and on the other hand is not so deliberately paced and so slow that, for example, the town center idea for the Downs, I have a concern that if the right sorts of structures are not built quickly enough, then that town center won't really develop as a center for the community. It will be eventually sort of a neighborhood amenity for the Downs. And I think that there are a lot of questions about how we can dial that in so that the vision for the Downs, which I agree, I think is a thoughtful, useful vision that I think I would like to see, if it can be built in reality the same way that we are sort of expecting it to be built. So that's a set of concerns that I have. As far as the growth management ordinance in particular, I think we've already heard some of the positives and negatives about it. I think I agree that it is a sort of a blunt instrument that will not be a one-size-fits-all tool for everything. But I do think it is, like I said, a useful tool in the town council's toolbox. And so I think it has both the positive of helping us be able to exert a little bit of leverage, for lack of a better word, over the direction and the pace of the planned growth, so that we're not, completely without any ability to oversee that. And on the other hand, the negative is, again, if my concern is getting things dialed in so that the vision actually happens in the way that we hope it happens, I don't know that, the GMO by itself is the right way to do that.
Thank you, Marty Topple. Peter Freilinger.
Yeah, I've got two primary concerns with where the Downs is right now. And like I said, in concept, as I've mentioned, I think the idea of the creation of a dense semi-urban neighborhood on the old Downs property, which was kind of laying fallow, is a great use of a unique resource that is great for the town. But there's two really primary issues right now that are of concern to me. The first is the developers, the Risbaras, are looking for the GMO exemption to place a lot more housing, but they haven't really given a commitment to building the timing and the commitment of what the downtown crossing, the downtown area will look like. I think before the town should grant any sort of GMO exemption or any sort of that, we need a clear commitment, and we almost need to see groundbreaking on what will be that amenity, that set of small retail, restaurant, professional office space buildings that will, in theory, be a magnet not just for the Downs, but for the community at large. And until we see that, I think it's inappropriate for the Risbaras to be looking for an immediate exemption to the placement of another 450 residential units. The other piece, though, is as they do that next phase of 450 to however many is the final number of units, there is going to have to be an answer to the primary school build out for the town. 8 Corners is too crowded. Blue Point is, I love Blue Point, but it's an old school. We need to have a solution for the elementary school thing before we really can drop in another 500 units of housing, many of which will attract small families, especially, the Downs. One of the great things about the Downs as a walkable community is it will attract, hopefully, families with small children. That's great, but we've got to put those children to school. And I can't wait for them to become friends of my sons, but I want an answer for them that makes sense for everybody. So I think we have to answer those two first. Once we do that, though, I think looking at a wholesale or a longer term exemption for the Downs to build residential units in line with more of their comprehensive plan makes perfect sense.
Thanks, Peter. Nick Mcgee.
Sure. Peter definitely touched on it. The one big glaring area of concern here is what stops the developers from, if they were granted an exemption for 450, they're saying they wanted initially 1,000 units to make that downtown center work. What's to stop them from building the residential side? And then if the market turns, they go away. And where's our community center? Where's our school? Where's the $13 million traffic movement improvement at the Payne Road intersection? What's our guarantee as a town? And I don't think you're acting responsibly as a counselor if you're not looking at it from that point of view. What's my safeguard? I understand you want to make this downtown work. There's a lot of people in this community that want that downtown to work. But how are we protecting our residents, our citizens, our taxpayers, and our tax dollars from something like that happening? And please do not misconstrue that to say that that's what I believe will happen or that's what their intent is. That definitely don't. I think as far as developers go, I believe they're genuine in their commitment to this community and to that area. But things change, markets change. So what do you do as a counselor to make sure we're not stuck holding the bag and all we have is a lot of apartments and no community center, no facility for a school? That's mission one. Get that in writing from somebody with a big bond attached to it.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes and I'm going to ask the question of the night. It's come in repeatedly to me all day long. Almost exactly worded the same every time. Should you be elected, if the following item comes up and you are asked to vote for or against the Downs request for an exemption from the GMO for 400 to 700 units of new mixed use and multifamily housing to be built in the 90-acre section in and around the planned town center, how will you vote? Peter?
Well, first off, if it were to come to us today, and I think look at Nick as well on this one, if it were coming to us today, I'd say no, because we simply don't have the guarantees, and guarantees are a tough word. We don't have the written commitments. We don't have the clearly stated project plan and timing, and we don't have the sequencing of the rest of the Downs development to justify at this moment another 450 to 700 units of housing. Full stop. We need to have commitments for those other amenities. Certainly, at a very bare minimum, the downtown project, which is what will prevent those 700 new units from just creating traffic to go to the Hannafords or the Shaws or to on the Vine or wherever it will go. We need those amenities to draw that neighborhood together and make sure it's not just a new sort of landmine of traffic on the community. But we also need it because that's what we're hoping for out of the Downs in general when we kind of embarked on this project. We were hoping for an area that we could go to shop at, to use the grocery store, that our kids who live in that area might have a new primary school and that we might get a community center out of it. So right now, the vote would have to be no, because we just don't have those other list of things that make those 450 to 700 units make sense in the context of not just our town, but the Downs in general. However, if there is borrows and if the town comes together and plans thoughtfully for development of those additional resources and amenities, does so early on in the project so that when the 700 units come online in the future, they are now plugged into a development which makes sense for the whole town and is already up and running, or at least certainly very much under construction, then yes, then I could see voting for that. But as it is today, without those plans concretely in front of the council, it would be hard to see a yes.
Thanks, Peter. Nick Mcgee.
No, and for reasons stated in my previous go about. That's it. I think you got to protect the community first. We need more info. Peter's on the right track here.
Thank you. Marty Topple.
I also would vote no to a blanket exemption. I think that gives away the leverage that the town has through the GMO to help us control the direction of how the Downs is going. So my answer would also be no.
Oh, you guys are so quick here with that one. I've just got one more question and then we'll go to closing statements. And I'm going to take it back to the survey, which emphatically says that 67% of the survey people in Scarborough are against the rapid growth of single-family homes and multifamily housing. Yet, those same people are in favor of affordable housing and workforce housing. How do we stand about housing in general? That would be Nick.
Thank you. Yeah. So what you're hearing there is it feels conflicting at times, right? We don't want more growth. However, if we're going to do it, let's have it be this type of growth. For me, growth is growth, whatever fashion it may take. Some people see enormous value in affordable housing. I think there's also enormous value in single family housing. I've never thought a family moving in and seeing kids ride their bikes down the street and sending them to a great school and being part of a good community. I've never seen that as a detriment. There's costs associated with it. Sure. Affordable housing is a regional need. And I think when we did the counselors night, I made it sure to point out to the counselors that were there, and hopefully they were listening, is we're here representing the people that live here now. Affordable housing, regional workforce housing, those are regional issues, state issues, even nationwide issues. And I asked them to make sure that they weren't prioritizing solving statewide issues or regional issues over how our residents feel about this topic. And I think our character of our community comes first and foremost. I think listening to the people out there, they know what they're seeing because they're living it every day on Route 1. They're living it every day on 114. They're seeing changes to the community and they're not exactly excited about it. That doesn't mean all change is bad. I think Marty made that point earlier. But what the feeling is it's almost helpless, right? We're not controlling it. It just keeps happening and happening. Who's got their arms around this and what are we going to do about it? I think that's where the community's at when they give you a response like it. I think that's what you're getting for a mixed signal.
Thanks, Nick. Marty Topple?
Could you repeat the question? I was listening so intently to. the
I sure
previous
can. The community survey showed overwhelmingly that single-family homes, 67%, felt that single-family homes and multifamily housing, was moving too fast. Yet at the same time, income restricted affordable housing and workforce housing was considered to be moving too slow. How do you come to grips on housing?
Yeah,
What,
so
what housing is good?
I think the character of Scarborough is determined by not being afraid to welcome people who want to come here and live here and contribute to the community. So I think as far as the survey is concerned, I imagine that there is some spillover between affordable housing and recognizing that we're living in not only a crazy pandemic, but an absolutely crazy housing market and have been in one for quite a long time. And so I think there's a real sense that single family housing should be affordable. And I think there's some bleed over in people's perception of affordable housing separate and apart from that strict definition of what affordable housing is. So I don't think that Scarborough should be afraid of single family housing. I don't think Scarborough should be afraid of building apartments. I don't think Scarborough should be afraid of building any other kind of housing as long as we're doing it in the way that I think we all agree it should be done, which is something that is carefully thought out, carefully considered, planned for with an eye towards the impact on the future. But my overall view toward housing is I don't think that Scarborough should be afraid to want to attract recent college graduates that want to come here and live in an apartment. I don't think Scarborough should be afraid to want to attract families, whether they have children or don't have children. I think the character of Scarborough can survive and indeed thrive with inviting people and welcoming people that want to live here and be here and contribute to the community. And I think the reason for that is, maybe I'm personalizing this too much. I am one of the people that moved here because I thought that Scarborough had exactly the type of character that I would want to be a part of. So I don't know that we need to be afraid of allowing people that feel that they would like to be a part of a community like Scarborough that has a certain character. I don't think that bringing people in that all share that common mindset is going necessarily to destroy the character that is really, I think, attracting all of these people to Scarborough.
Thank you, Marty Topple. Peter Freilinger.
I kind of view this through an interesting lens because I'm on both the long range planning committee, which dealt with a lot of these questions of character, and I'm nervous about that term. But then I'm also on the zoning board of appeals, which and both committees, interestingly, have probably the most input from community members in Higgins Beach. Higgins Beach has its own character to it. Let's face it. It's I think of it as a 50s beachfront paradise. And a lot of the buildings are older than that, but it's got that very dense, tight-knit feeling. And it's got a character to it. There's no other word to use for it. It's got a character to it. We couldn't build another Higgins Beach today without radically redoing our zoning code, because our zoning code doesn't allow for lot sizes that would allow for building envelopes the way that they have them in Higgins Beach that make Higgins Beach as special as it is. So I look at this and at this question and I think, well, we've got some tools that we have really mismanaged. And that's led to this sense in the town survey that we've got too much growth of one type, and yet we don't have enough affordable housing. If we had lot sizes that they had in Higgins Beach in 1952, we would have a lot of affordable housing in Scarborough, but we don't. Our R2 districts don't allow it. They full stop don't allow it. And we don't have enough dense development districts that would allow for that. On the flip side, we have allowed over the past 15 years since the 2006 comprehensive plan, an explosion of very expensive McMansion development out on Holmes Road and out on, the west of the turnpike. And people look at that and say, that doesn't feel like Scarborough character. That feels like something else. That feels like Cumberland Foresight. And so I think the town survey is correctly capturing the zeitgeist. Sorry, I'm a Harvard grad. I used the word zeitgeist. The zeitgeist of the town, which is we've done something wrong in a certain type of development, and that's squeezed us out of being able to make better decisions about development that we like, of people that we want to draw into our community, small families, people from other backgrounds, people from working class backgrounds, et cetera, who want to be a part of Scarborough. And I think it's a clarion call to the town council, to the planning staff, to make some different decisions going forward. And that's one of the reasons I'm running.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to go to closing statements. We're obviously going over the 8 o'clock hour. Marty is going to make the first closing statement, followed by Peter and then Nick. I did want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to thank the audience out there who sent in a number of questions and showed a lot of interest in this special election, which is coming up on June 14th. And early voting will start on May 16th. So be looking out for news either on the town website, the town newsletter, or some of the local media for the exact details, because it's still coming out. I want to thank the Scarborough Community Chamber for asking me to moderate this event. In particular, Tanya Beckwith, who did a ton of work behind the scenes, Art Dillon, who has worked with me for a long time putting these on, as has Nancy Kroll from the Public Library, and Karen Martin from SEDCO. And with that, I think you've got enough time to gather your thoughts. I do want to congratulate all of you for running, and thank you for running. You're going into something that's, you're going to be going into a hot seat when you go into it, whoever wins. Marty Topple, your closing comments.
Kevin, thank you very much. And again, thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I came to this event, honestly, as much a voter for the town council election as a candidate for the town council. And as a voter, I am very reassured by what I've heard tonight, because I think everybody that's up here has a lot to contribute, has thought through these issues, and I think will be a real credit to the town. So as a voter, that makes me very happy. I hope it's not an easy decision for any of you, or I guess I hope it's a really easy decision and you all vote for me. But I'm reassured because I think that all three of us really care, and I hope that you find that equally reassuring. Because I want to make this as informative to the voters as possible, I suppose in my closing I should say, I hope it's clear from what I've said tonight that I am not running for this council position on a platform with planks in the platform. If you are looking for a counselor that has very firm ideas on all of these various issues that the town is facing and knows sitting here today how he's going to vote, that person is not me, and you would be better served by voting for somebody who isn't me. So I think the reason that I'm running again is because I really want to get involved in this community. Public service is important to me. Being able to get the sense that I am really contributing and giving back is important to me, and this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. My commitment to the town is that I really will think deeply and carefully about these issues, because I think it's very clear to everyone we are looking at some very serious, difficult questions about where we are and where we want to go and how we want to get there. And I don't know that there are any easy answers to those questions. I wish there were. I think it would make all of our lives a lot easier. So all that I can say is, my pledge will be to really do my best to listen, to take in as much information as possible, and really try to make decisions that I can feel good about, that I think are in the best interests of the town and are in line with how the town would like to go. So with that, I'll say thank you again, Kevin, for putting this on, and thank you to both Nick and Peter. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty Topple. Peter Freilinger.
Thanks, Kevin. And again, with Marty, thank you to the chamber. Thank you to SEDCO. Thank you for the town for making this the facilities available. It will be a difficult decision, and I echo what Marty said. If I'm asking for your vote, I'm asking for you to vote for Peter Freilinger. But if you vote for either of my two competitors, the town is going to benefit. We're lucky that we have, I think, three gentlemen, we're all ugly looking guys, who have the best interest of this town in mind. And I think will offer a great perspective on where we'll go in the future. The perspective I bring again comes from the service that I've had on the long range planning committee and on the zoning board in particular. And that interplay has really focused me on some of the growth, the zoning, as you've heard from my responses earlier, some of the planning challenges that we have. And they are going to be big challenges. I'm looking forward to them. I'm looking forward to them because I'm part of the town and I want to see this town, yes, grow, but grow and stay Scarborough. And I think if we will pull together as a town council, and if we work together as a town council, we're going to accomplish both of those goals. We're going to grow as Scarborough and stay Scarborough. So that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here for. If you have to vote on anything, the laced hair might be a choice that I would recommend. But otherwise, voters of Scarborough, you've got a fine selection here. And again, if I weren't running for council, I'd probably be out campaigning for either of these two gentlemen. This has been a wonderful forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Nick Mcgee.
Yeah, thank you for the SEDCO and the chamber for taking the time to do this. And as they've both pointed out, this is a very qualified table. I think all of our hearts are in the right place. And I know I'm supposed to make a pitch selfishly for my own benefit. I think I have a wife and 3 kids at home. They were like, don't go too hard, Dad. But I'll say this: spending as many years as I have, kind of working in and around Scarborough, there's a couple of things that I think we can do better, and that GMO just keeps coming back. And I'll tell you why. I think we approached it a little wrong. I think we have a couple areas, and I know we like to talk about the downs and pick on the downs, but look, we've got Eastern Village, we've got Dunstan Crossing. Some of you probably don't even know this. There's 300 units approved over here off of Route 1, I think on Enterprise Drive. There's stuff I've seen at the planning board that has actually been approved and has not been built, or no one's talking about yet. I know this from years of experience that it's coming. So I think here's where we've maybe made a slight error, and I like that the council really took some action last time around, but I think the high density growth areas really need their own permit pool. And I think that would really help kind of, one, know that you're targeting the growth in certain areas of town with certain development patterns. And you would have, and it's not right to favor one of those high density developers over another. Why does one developer, because he's first in line, get to gobble up those permits? GMO takes care of a little bit of that with some limitations. But anyways, I think there should be a separate pool of permits for high density growth areas. And then I think we talk about another pool of permits used for your average guy who's got a single family lot, can't wait to put his own house on. And then somebody else comes forward and says, hey, I got a 4-unit apartment building I'd like to build. Where do I go? And I think there's a way to work that. So I think that would be one of my initiatives. Other is with all that growth that we keep talking about, how about we start focusing on open space initiatives? Why doesn't the town invest more time and effort and resources into acquiring open space for this community? Land Trust does a fantastic job, but how about we give them a boost? Let's identify some of those parcels we don't want to see turned into high density development areas, and let's save them. And that would be another initiative. And then I think at the back of my mind, at the end of the day, there's, I'm sorry, Nancy just flashed me the, hey, take it easy sign. I think at the end of the day, you got to watch out for your dollars. You got to watch out for your community. You got seniors here, and we're an aged state, and we have an aging population here. They're on a fixed income, and they are living in a time of crazy inflation. So let's figure out ways that we can also help them throughout this process. That's where I'll end, but I appreciate everyone's time and efforts here. I really do.
Thank you. I know one of you will be taking a seat later in June. I hope we see the two remaining candidates in October when we get our next candidates night for 2022. So thank you very much. And I appreciate all of you putting yourselves forward and coming here tonight. And we will see you in October of 2022, probably late September, for our next Candidates Night Forum in Scarborough. Good night, everybody.